Allspark TV. Now that's just prime.
All right. Hello, my name is Patrick, also known as Debuster Prime for allspark.com. And we are here to interview Alexander Bornstein. He's the score composer for the upcoming Transformers series on Netflix, Transformers War for Cybertron Siege, premiering on July 30th. And also joining me for this interview to help me lean more into the musical aspects of this interview is fellow score composer Matt Campana. His credits include working with Tommy Tallarico on Video Games Live, which is just a wonderful live presentation of video game music. And Alexander Bornstein, his credits include the CW's Supernatural, Marvel's Agent Carter for ABC, and the ongoing new Twilight Zone revival series. So just to kick things off, Alex, how did you first get involved with this new Transformer series?
It was kind of one of those things, being at the right place at the right time, and I was recommended by a couple of people, including the voiceover director for the series, to F.J. DeSanto, who's the showrunner. And that kind of led to me sort of auditioning for the show, and then, kind of from there, sort of figuring out, sort of like waiting, on pins and needles if I was going to get it or not. And then, thankfully I did, and then I started working on the series last year.
Okay. Before you jumped onto this project, did you have any prior personal connections with Transformers through TV shows, toys, any of the movies?
Yeah, my earliest Transformers memory is I was 6 or 7 when the Sci-Fi Channel launched, and part of their programming block in the 90s, I think it was their first sort of wave of programming, was G1 Transformers every weekday morning. So for most of that school year, my whole morning routine revolved around sitting down to watch G1. And so like that's sort of like probably the farthest back my memories go to Transformers. And I remember, I think it was around that time they reissued the original Convoy toy, and so like it was like one of those good timing situations where like I was getting into the cartoon and they happened to be reissuing this toy that I was able to, and sort of, and from there it just became sort of a kind of continuing interest, but it would sort of come and go with whatever series were out at the time. So, it's the G1, and then I admittedly didn't get into Beast Wars as much as I did G1, and then kind of like kept up a little bit with the franchise through the years. And then obviously when the movies came out, that was a big catalyst for kind of reigniting my interest, just because, seeing like Peter Cullen come back as Optimus Prime in, $100 million movie, was a big deal. It was cool to see like an audience full of people who probably hadn't seen Transformers, right? Didn't have a big familiarity with it, sort of get sucked into the conflict and sort of like feel the same way I did as a kid watching the series.
Wow, that's great. So it sounds like you have roots going back to the 80s series, but if I remember when that was on the Sci-Fi Channel, I think that might have been maybe around the early 90s.
Yeah, I want to say Sci-Fi Channel launched in 92 or 93. So G1 had been over for a while at that point in terms of it being, new. And I was born in 86, and that was the year the movie came out. So I wasn't quite there at the original original spark.
Wow. So have you seen in addition to the G1 cartoon, the 1986 movie?
I did, yeah, I have.
Okay. Yeah, it's, one thing, I received questions from Allspark about this upcoming project, and something that came up a lot was possible influences from, Transformers has been around for more than 30 years, and there have been various composers, like there's Steve Jablonsky and the the more recent live action movies. But going back to 1986, there was Vince DiCola, who was also, well, he's known very much within the Transformers community just for working on that movie, but he's also done some big other stuff like scoring the Rocky series. And I was wondering if any of those composers or from any other Transformers series had any inspiration on the stuff that you're doing for this current series.
I think, a discussion that FJ and I had a long time ago when we were getting started was, I think we're sort of stepping away from a lot of those influences because the tone of Siege is different from, I think, a lot of other Transformers series that have come before it. I think it's very respectful and really sort of steps up to honoring the character dynamics and the things that people have come to expect and want out of Transformers. But I think there's a lot of stuff in it that's, I think it's sort of a step in a different direction. I think, and hopefully fans agree in a very cool way. And so the music is kind of reflective of that. And so we don't have any overt sort of homages to the Vince DiCola music or the Walsh and Douglas underscore from G1. But I think that's just a reaction to the fact that this is sort of a different sort of approach to the franchise.
So Alex, how do you actually, so you're let's move away from this towards what's trying to be communicated, especially from that character building, character dynamic. How did you come up with that, with the folks that are working on the project? I mean, what do those conversations look like? Are you looking at content as far as, just scene based? Like, how are you getting into that?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting challenge for me as a composer, and Matt, I'm sure you can empathize with this. It's very daunting when you're, on any project where you're sort of staring at this blank page. And in this environment, you're staring at a blank page with Optimus Prime and Megatron kind of staring at you over, from the other end of the room. And so there was a lot of pressure to, if we're going to go ahead and do something that's maybe stepping in this different direction, well, then it better be good, and it better, make some kind of a statement. And so what we really wanted to focus in on then, were these character dynamics and these relationships that people, are used to, but we're going to go into more detail with. And I think the way we tried to do that is with, creating a lot of thematic content musically. And so, there's a very clear Autobot theme. There's a very clear Decepticon theme. And those get developed in different ways for different characters. But at the same time, they are also used in these sort of big picture contexts as well, because it's not like a 3-hour movie where we can develop all these little motifs for every single character, which is sort of, an approach that, I guess John Williams would take or did take with Star Wars versus, I think what a composer like Jerry Goldsmith would do, which is going to be more of a sort of main thematic building blocks that then get developed on their own merit, depending on what's going on in the story. And that tends to be the direction that I go to compositionally. And that's what we've done with Siege, is we establish these very clear themes for, Autobot, Decepticons, and Cybertron itself, because it's, in this series, Cybertron is really kind of its own character in a way. And, there's other more spoilery things I can't really get into, but it becomes very important that Cybertron has a theme of its own.
So you just mentioned that Cybertron in particular is kind of a character in and of itself. For this series, if I'm getting this correct, it's very much based in space and on Cybertron. In contrast to a lot of other Transformers series and movies, there's not really time spent on Earth. Is there anything that you considered in the scoring to make this sound more alien or more, mechanical or robotic, since there aren't necessarily really humans around, but still to make it relatable to a human audience in some way?
Yeah, definitely. Something that we tried to do, is that we definitely have a lot of things you'll hear in film scores. There is orchestral elements. There are, there are some organic instruments that sort of lend themselves to a more human sound, but we do a lot of sound design and processing to take those elements and then sort of put this other sheen on them. So if there's a piano, it has some kind of processing on it, so it sounds just a little bit different and maybe a little bit more alien. And it's also, too, when you have distinct themes established, you can actually get away with a lot of weird experimentation. And so, like, there's, some of the more out there elements of the show, we definitely would do I would take different hits or different, like, I use choir on a couple of occasions, but it's processed in such a way that it sort of sounds like, for lack of a better term, an alien robotic orchestra. And the main titles will do that a lot, where there's this kind of odd vocally sort of texture that just, it sounds familiar, but it also sounds a little bit weird at the same time. But it's also mixed with things that are a little more traditional. So it's not, this is not, an avant-garde type of score, but there are these little elements that make it just sound a little bit alien or a little bit more otherworldly, because we are spending all of this time, on, another planet. And it's, it's a unique thing for Transformers to be able to spend so much time, on Cybertron. And, the video games, let you do it, obviously, the War for Cybertron and Fall of Cybertron. But since this is a more narrative approach, the music gets more of an opportunity to sort of establish those guidelines.
So from a musical perspective, it sounds like, fans will be able to walk away from this kind of humming the theme song, humming the different, motifs that you're coming up with here thematically. How is it working with this content that you love and are obviously very familiar with, but then having to score an entire season of that? How do you kind of work with that? Is it episode by episode, scene by scene with your directors? How do you actually have those conversations?
We work on about 2 episodes at a time. That seems to be the pace that we've established with Polygon, and that allows us to kind of, sort of establish things, by about 40-minute chunks at a time, and which is good because it kind of, if I had to do everything at once, it might get a little bit overwhelming. But this allows for me to kind of, especially with the timetable that we've had, I had the time to write the themes and make sure we were all happy with those. I had the time to work on the first 2 episodes. And, by the time I got to the finale, I had felt like, okay, now I really know where I'm going to let these themes go to in terms of their development. And, there's, oh, well, that, and at the same time, it gives me time to think about, because I had access to the scripts and the animatics. I could go watch episode 6 if I needed to as an animatic, and then come back to the full episode of, was it, I think 3 or 4 was when I sort of had that realization where I was like, oh, I can set up these seeds in episode 3 or 4 that then will kind of bloom by the 6th episode.
Awesome.
And mentioning you said there were different themes for the Autobots and the Decepticons, and then there was also some stuff with different characters. And you said that in contrast to maybe a movie, there weren't, or certain scores, very specific themes for every character. But I'm sure since Optimus Prime and Megatron are very prominent, there's probably something special for them. So what is it about maybe the tone or the way the characters work? What have you done to distinguish them from the other Autobots? What sticks out about their themes?
So the way it's kind of approached is that the Autobot theme is naturally, it's very heroic, and it really sort of it's what, again, I hope that people find it memorable, and I hope that people will want to hum it when they hear it. And so by contrast, the Decepticon theme is a little bit more stoic and tense, and it's not. I tried to be very careful not to just make it like mustache twirling evil, and it's it's a little bit more nuanced than that. And something I tried to do to hopefully make that work is that there's a B section of the Autobot theme that I tend to use for that ends up in the hands of different characters throughout the show. But that B theme for the Autobots is actually the Decepticon theme, just with different chords, because the whole idea is that at some point they were all Cybertronians. They were all, one society that then split. And so the Decepticons took this part of the Autobot theme and they made it their own very angsty, angry version of it. And so to make things more distinct for the individual characters, what I tried to do, since the melody was kind of established, is you just sort of change the arrangement a little bit, and you can break down that theme into a little motif for a specific character. So the Autobot theme, as it were, can be compressed into maybe like 4 notes as opposed to or I'm just picking a random number, but you can compress the number of notes in the theme when you just need, Optimus Prime stepping in to save, Wheeljack. Okay, that's the truncated Autobot theme on French horns. Or it's a more emotional moment, it's the whole Autobot theme for Ratchet on strings. And so you can, but you can make it modular and shift it to sort of the different characters as needed. And I guess to make sure I'm answering your question, it's I tend to do that by changing the arrangements, and certain characters get certain instruments. So at least I can be specific when I really need to get specific.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you how do you select that? I mean, it like you have this really cool tool. I think before we started recording, you had this really neat system that lets you do like this vocalizing and things like that. How do you choose, hey, everybody and their mother has X instrument, Y instrument, but this content means something to me and I want to make it special and unique? How do you go through that sampling process to kind of keep it true to story and fit that character theme? Like how do you think through that as a composer?
There's a certain component where you actually sometimes don't think about those things. There's a lot of, and this is just me and my own workflow, and everybody's different. There's a lot of things that I do that are just very reactionary in terms of how the music gets created. I was on my couch watching TV when the Autobot theme like popped into my head, and I sort of like, oh yeah, okay, that could work. And then I kind of run with it from there. And that was after like 4 weeks of me just being like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a complete fraud. I shouldn't be writing music for Transformers. And so, and I didn't question it when I was like, oh, it's going to be this, and it's going to be primarily on, French horns, and it's going to be this. You just have to kind of listen to your instincts, I guess, is the short version of that. And, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I was very lucky that FJ and I have been kind of on the same page creatively with the series as we've gone along, and a lot of ideas that I've done have stuck. In terms of making those decisions, sometimes I make them, and then FJ wants something different, and that's just the back and forth of the show. Sometimes it's a little bit more clear cut though. Like obviously, like this guy is kind of just makes weird sound, and so it's really, you kind of just know, like, I'm probably not going to write a sweet love cue with this, or maybe I will, but you kind of start with that database in your mind of what works and what doesn't, and then it kind of just builds from there. But you do have to turn your brain off from time to time, because I can sometimes overthink it, and I start to get second guessing, and just, it's no good for me. I get way too stressed out.
So you mentioned for the Decepticon theme that it's a play off of what was going on with the Autobots. At some point, maybe they were united and there was a separation. Is there certain kinds of emotions or relational themes between the Autobots and Decepticons that kind of drive the overall tone of the series, like some kind of overarching emotional line that's going through?
Yeah, I want to be as detailed as I can, but also not get into spoiler territory. There is definitely a lot of interplay between the two themes, where you will sometimes, low strings are playing one theme, and then you have, brass playing another theme on top of it. And so in terms of the counterpoint, there's a lot of opportunity to play against elements of the show musically. But then there's also a lot of things you can do, or that I've tried to do, where you sort of establish things early on in little fragments, and then you build them as you go. And like there's a little motif for the Allspark, and that goes through a very, very sort of intense growth throughout the series, where it's introduced in a very very small, intimate cue, and then by later on in the series it's like full-blown orchestral, and everything in the kitchen sink kind of being thrown at it. Now the reasons that happen I can't get into, but there is a intent sort of into what you're going to do with these themes. And I'm hoping that there'll be a soundtrack album that you can also sort of chart some of the development of these things as well, because there's a lot going on, and so it's easy sometimes to the music does its job, which is just to move the story along, but sometimes it's nice to be able to go to a CD or an album and sort of hear everything without all the sound design.
Great. All right, Matt, do you have any further questions right now?
Yeah. So Alex, when you're working with a group of people, because it really is a group of people that are trying to tell this same story, how do you find that common ground? You mentioned earlier, I may see a thing a certain way, somebody may see it another way. How do you actually go through those conversations? Are you talking about story? Are you talking about characters? Specifically to this, is there history because of the entire world of Transformers? How do you actually stage those conversations to find that commonality and land on something?
I think a big part of it is when you sort of realize that in terms of story there is a universal language there, in terms of every story is about characters trying to achieve goals, trying to these things that we all kind of, I think as a society, understand what's going on in storytelling. And that's a great foundation, because it allows a lot of things, like FJ and I didn't have to talk about music theory. It was just about what these characters are about. And that was kind of how I sort of was able to get through, one, find the commonality that you mentioned, but two, sort of push through the pressure of working on a franchise that's as well known as this, was when you strip away a lot of everything that all the baggage, and just go, okay, this is a story about two groups of ideologies that are fighting each other, and they both think they're doing the right thing, except one's definitely not doing the right thing. And what do the characters who are involved in this struggle deal with? And when we kind of reduced it to those very basic terms, things started kind of clicking and coming together. And then you're realizing, like, oh, wait a second, and it's kind of what I really like about War for Cybertron as a series, is that it does get into this nitty gritty of the characters, and sort of the hesitancy that people might have, or the complex feelings that they might have. And as a composer, that really is a good way to start coming up with ideas for the music. And then you can kind of turn around and then step back and go, oh, but this applies to Optimus Prime, or this applies to Alita 1, or this applies to Megatron. And it kind of takes care of itself in a way. And it also helps cut through, and we allow for a common language with the showrunners.
That's wonderful.
And this is something that was brought up before we started recording the interview. But you mentioned that you just got this new instrument called the pipe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not appearing in the season that's launching on July 30th, but something to possibly look forward to in upcoming parts of the series. Would you be willing to demonstrate a little bit of that for us, to give us something to look forward to?
Yeah, let me, let's see. It should still all have the same settings that I showed you earlier. Let's see. so it's the Pipe by Soma Labs, and okay, cool. It is all still set up. Let's see if this works.
Wow.
That's awesome, man. Absolutely awesome. I think the hair on my wrist here just raised. That's really cool, man.
It's a lot of fun. I was telling Patrick, I just got it, and so I'm still like figuring out how it even really works, because it's just a bunch of weird symbols on the side, but it's so far so good. I'll have to keep tweaking and messing around with it.
Wow. So how could you foresee yourself possibly using something like that in upcoming parts of this Transformer series?
Well, I think to go back to one of the earlier questions, I think this would be a good way to sort of find those kind of alien, otherworldly textures. Especially as we go deeper into the mythology of the show, I think there'll be a lot of opportunities to kind of, for these sort of unsettling, but also odd organic sounds at the same time. I think there'll be a lot of opportunity there to experiment, which will be fun. But all the while, like hanging on to those core thematic ideas.
Okay, great. And as we get closer to wrap things up, just kind of as a random fun question that we received a bit away from Transformers. So for Star Wars, Imperial March or Duel of the Fates, and why?
Oh man, that's like one of the coolest questions I've ever been asked. I think Duel of the Fates.
Okay. Is it something in particular about the music itself, or memories just tied to that a climactic battle in episode 1?
Yeah, I think it's a more enigmatic piece of music to me. Like the Imperial March is obviously, it's iconic and it's great, and I've air conducted it alone more times than I can admit to. But yeah, there's something very weird about Duel of the Fates, and I guess there isn't a lot to compare it to in terms of like the other music in Star Wars. Like he's written some other choir pieces, but there is something very distinct and for lack of a better term, bizarre about Duel of the Fates that I've really come to appreciate as I've gotten older.
Okay. And so just maybe as a final note specific to this, is there anything that you really would like audiences to specifically I guess look out for, listen for when they tune into this series next month?
I really, really, really hope that people, think the themes for the Autobots and Decepticons, ring true to the characters and to the legacy of the franchise. It's as we discussed, there's a lot of pressure and it's very daunting to take on a franchise that's loved by so many people. So I hope that these themes resonate with the audience and think that they're worthy to be attached to these characters.
Oh, thank you so much, and thanks to both of you for taking time out to go over this. Matt, do you have any upcoming projects or social media that you would like to share?
Yeah, sure. We're just I'm doing some piano work, so MattCampana.com. You can roll into there. But I just wanted to say, Alex, absolutely fantastic listening and just hearing your thought process on this. A lot of folks are very cut and dry, and you're just saying, like, open your mind up. How can you explore this project? Really enjoy it, and I love what you said. Just shut your brain off sometimes. I think that's just. I'm gonna take that away on a notepad and think about that for a while. So seriously, thank you for just explaining all that. It's very awesome.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. It was nice to meet you guys, and this is a blast. So I really appreciate you guys taking the time and the interest in the show.
Yeah, and do you have any Alex, any upcoming projects or social media that you would like to share?
You can follow me on social media, Bornstein Music on Instagram and Twitter, and I guess the only upcoming project is Transformers War for Cybertron Siege on July 30th.
Okay. And I think you mentioned before that Twilight is still, or not Twilight, the Twilight Zone. That's still ongoing?
Yeah, Twilight Zone is ongoing. That's working for Marco Beltrami and Brandon Roberts as additional music composer, and I believe season 2 comes out tomorrow, June 25th. I guess this isn't going to be on for a while, but it's June 25th is when season 2 airs on CBS All Access.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys.
Have a great day.
All right, you too.
Bye now.
All right, bye.